Look Back has been all over the interwebs recently, and you can't seem to avoid it at this rate. I finally took the plunge thanks to a friend nudging me about it, and here I am. Am I cool now? Just kidding. I really resonated with the experiences of the main characters, and I'd like to analyze some of the touch points I found important for us to observe as creators or even as consumers. But before we begin, let's recap. The story features the relationship between a seemingly confident student named Virgino and a reclusive but highly skilled background artist named Kyomoto. Their dynamic begins on the more competitive side, at least for Fujino, as she compares herself with Kyomoto and thus enters her artist training arc. We all know what those are like. Ergo time. But truthfully, I actually enjoyed my time when I was... anyway. Kyomoto instead reveals her admiration for Fujino, being her inspiration to begin drawing, and thus sparks a newfound friendship and partnership as they work towards creating manga together. Of course, things take a turn as they age, where the girls' priorities differ and thus they go their separate ways, only for the tragic news of Kyomoto's death to spark a turn in the story. This is where Fujino is conflicted, and we are left wondering if she'll continue her manga post-tragedy. After realizing Kyomoto never stopped rooting for her, despite their choices, Fujino is seen back on her tablet, drawing away. Now that we've got a recap of what happened, let's take some key moments into consideration here. The blight of comparison is a huge factor in the progression of the story, where the two girls conflict and cause tension. Outside of Kyomoto's knowledge, Fujino brings the fight of competition into the mix as she works towards achieving better art skills by dedicating her free moments to the intense study sessions. This is all due to the initial hit to her ego, where she sees the amazing art of Kyomoto opposite hers. This ignites her vigor to progress and get better, when initially she only did it for fun and praise. Of course, the negative comments fuels this fire even more. This illustration is very important from a creative standpoint because it brings about the question of why. What is your why? Why do you make art? Why do you create? These are the hard-hit questions we must all face at some point as creatives, and this why can also morph and transform as we grow and change over time. Having motivation through comparison can be seen in both positive and negative contexts. On the one hand, we've got some form of motivation or inspiration to get us started, but on the other, this initial inertia can be a short-lived and false want from our temporary desires. What happens when we hit a wall, or this person disappears, or any number of reasons? In Look Back, the story is quite simple in that Fujino does not lose her momentum for a very long time. She continues this goal of becoming better than her peer, and nothing seems to change that. She looks unstoppable. That is, until we're met with the resistance of reality. Evidently, Kyomoto has been working hard and getting better with her drawing, which Fujino feels is insurmountable when she compares their work once again. She cannot outdo her, even after all this grind and effort, losing motivation, making excuses, and freeing herself from the burden. Does this feel familiar? I think it's quite interesting to see the dynamic between the two individuals with different lifestyles and the pros and cons of their situations. Of course, life is never actually a fair playfield, but it isn't like life is against you either. It just is, for better or worse. For Kyomoto, she has the abundance of time to work on her skills that Fujino simply cannot while in class. and Fujino has a more balanced life with friendships, social activities, and doesn't fear communication like Kyomoto, who is homebound in fear. I think this brings into light a new concept that I'd like to talk about, and that is this idea of sacrifice in pursuit of a want or a passion. In Look Back, Fujino ultimately gives up to the idea that she will never surpass Kyomoto's level, and thus feels any more progress is pointless. She did not reach her goals, thus feels like a failure in many ways. Yet, ironically, we also see her happily engaging in her normal activities prior to pursuing art, and this begs the question of whether she is better off without this hustle mindset versus with it. As a creative, we can probably relate to being absorbed in the things we love to do and probably neglecting other aspects of our life. I think the interesting dialectic within the story is that, at first, it seemed liberating that she was free from the shackles of working so intensely toward this undefined goal, just to beat Kyomoto. However, later on in the story, she actually meets Kyomoto for the first time and discovers that she was actually an inspiration for Kyomoto's work in the first place. Fujino and Kyomoto begin to work together. They find kinship in this one common interest, and it becomes a positive source of reinforcement. A new friend, a new passion, a new goal. We aren't all that lucky to find this trifecta in our pursuits. We don't all discover our partner in crime so easily. Though this definitely does sell the fact that sacrifices are sometimes worth it, especially when they end up successfully winning a competition with their manga. I will say this, reality is not always this kind, but it definitely helps the story progress forward and is a nice reminder that, yes, things can work out. These victories create a great foundation for the story's progression, reiterating that, in the end, the sacrifice was in fact a worthwhile endeavor for both of them. This does feel challenged though, as we come to the finale where Fujino stares into the old comic strip from the past, regretting everything and almost giving up completely. We can see her lack of strength where fears of guilt cloud her judgment, until she eventually realizes that Kyomoto never gave up on her, and hence, neither could she. Knowing this fueled her pursuit of her manga once again, and I'll touch back on this in a little bit, but first, I'd like to explore the idea of the sunk cost fallacy, where Fujino has dedicated so much time to this one subject that it would almost be a shame for her to venture into anything else. Even as this vision of an alternate life plays out, it seems like her life was always meant to return to this state of creating art. When she is working toward this goal to surpass Kyomoto, but feels defeated or like she has lost the battle in skill, her fears of failure evolve from the touch points of comparison and expectation. In life, it's an interesting thing how easily our minds can make this decision of defeat, but with the advent of some type of trigger like meeting Kyomoto for the first time, can reignite this passion we had suppressed because of our own self-doubts and limiting beliefs about success. Success is not simple or easy and is a constant failure upon failure. So for Fujino, it feels as though her motivation simply stems from that feeling of being acknowledged, or even further still, by someone she believes is far greater than her, acknowledging her. So I guess here we can ask ourselves, is this a healthy form of motivation? A support network is very important for many aspects of our life, and I think it can definitely keep us accountable, keep us in a right mindset if we get off track, as long as we are in a healthy and balanced relationship at least, much like what the girls seem to have here. Of course, there is a stir later on where Fujino tries to keep Kimoto from branching out and exploring her options, arguably as a form of love and much needed support. After all, they were inseparable for many years at this point, and that shift felt so anterior to what life was like. It was no longer ordinary or comfortable. It was a risk. It meant being alone, and it meant motivating herself to continue her art pursuits by herself. I think this is why when Kimoto passed, that line had been severed to the point where she couldn't pretend like it was holding on anymore. That distance that they'd created on their last meeting, it was almost too harsh. She was not even able to experience her last moments or words, but this is where Kimoto's comic strip plays a significant role. This almost acts as the final goodbye that draws the two closer once again, allowing Fujino to finally gain the courage to enter her room and discover that she was always her biggest fan. And now, she could not give up. Fujino opens up to a new beginning through taking this empty strip, almost like a link and reminder of their friendship and this bond they shared, giving permission to continue and honor Kimoto's memory. There are so many caveats to becoming an artist or creator. We enter our passions with obsession to improve, to evolve, and make something meaningful to ourselves or others. We make tough sacrifices and risk things that feel irrational and confusing to the standard person, where they don't realize the fire that burns deep inside us, to showcase something more, to experience something that isn't linear or customary to their want of the American dream, so to speak. We may delineate, feel frustration, feel torn by the mistakes and choices we make along the way, as nothing is perfect or goes according to plan. People change, we change, the world also changes. Nothing is static or given, and nothing should be. We are constantly tested, and we'll never stop thinking about what the right decision is or was at any given moment. Though, what we do gain is all we've learned along the way, all the feelings we've felt, every person who has come into our lives and helped shape a portion of it, one way or another. Look Back touches on so many core aspects to being an artist, and we can insert ourselves into these scenarios because it may be a familiar pastime or our current state of being as we are now. We're just experiencing life, wherever it may take us. Though, if we can take away one thing, it is to simply keep going. What that means to you is up to you in your own circumstance. But for now, I'll leave you to ponder what your why is, what your goals are, what you want out of this short-lived existence. So take care and create.